There's a very challenging video on YouTube called Age-Activated Attention Deficit Disorder. My version of it goes somewhat like this. Having done a load of washing overnight, after breakfast I head to the laundry to put it out on the line. But first I need to feed my cats, who have all followed me, howling, to what they regard as their food room, the laundry. I put on their collars, give each some dry food in their bowls and open the back door for them. As I do this, I notice that the herbs in pots on the veranda are very droopy. So I fill the watering can and give them a drink, then reckon I may as well water the other potted ornamentals scattered around the garden. Just as I finish up, I realise it's also time to give them a feed, so do the rounds again with liquid fertiliser. I head back in through the kitchen door and see that the dishwasher needs to be emptied, so I do that. Then remember that my breakfast plate and cup are still in my study, so I go back to fetch them. When I'm there, I just check my email and notice a couple of new posts on the paper's daily news blog, so I have a quick read of them. I see that the flowers in my study are looking a bit wilted, so go to the bathroom to fill the watering can, then think I'll also fill the cat's bowl, and while I'm at it, I'll have a bit of a play with her. I finally sit down at my desk and look at my to-do list. I reconcile my credit statements and transfer some money, then whip off a couple of email contributions to an ongoing discussion about ministry team matters. I'm then ready to head outside to do some serious weeding and gardening. But when I get to the back door next to the laundry, I realise that I still haven't put my washing on, and the whole morning sunlight has just disappeared. It's so easy to get distracted by trivia. But then what's facing at the moment isn't only trivia. There are the current world events that can seize my whole mind and refuse to let go. Climate change, widely manifest yet denied, and action lagging due to self-interest and lack of care. The pandemic still far from over, with vaccine hesitancy and hoarding fostering fruitful fields for new variants. Violent conflict in many places, multiplying hunger and illness among so many people. Fracturing of social cohesion, with self-interest being fostered and exploited for political power. Inequality, homelessness, poverty in our rich nation. Dispossession of our First Nations people and resistance to acknowledging this and working for true healing. Gender-based violence and bullying, the list just goes on. Today's reading from Mark's Gospel is therefore most apposite and timely. It carries in my New Oxford Annotated Bible a descriptive heading, exhortation not to be distracted from the movement by distressing events. Remember the context we've heard read and preached over the past few weeks, the importance that Byron highlighted of keeping moving on the way, with Alison emphasising the love of God and neighbour as central to the movement. Jesus has come to Jerusalem and made it clear from the outset that Jewish religious authorities are failing these imperatives. Immediately prior to today's Gospel reading, Jesus has roundly condemned the scribes and the temple economy of exploitation of the poor. And at the start of chapter 13, we find the disciples, as so often in the story, have failed to get it. Look, teacher, they marvel. What large stones and what large buildings. They are still admiring the grandeur of the temple. But Jesus is beyond equivocation. He ends his prophetic condemnation of temple exploitation with this prophecy of its destruction, also implicating those whose base of power it constituted. Not one stone will be left here upon another, all will be thrown down. The disciples in their shock seek some idea of when and how this will happen and how they should prepare, how they can follow the way, which leads Jesus to warn and instruct them how to remain faithful to the way despite worldly events, what some call the little apocalypse. Wars and rumours of wars, nation rising against nation, earthquakes in various places, famines. Through this, and the apocalyptic motives persist and amplify through the rest of the chapter, there is another clear message. Stay alert, keep awake, beware that no one leads you astray. Now, Mark was probably writing this in the midst of conflict between Rome and the Jewish zealots who had briefly taken Jerusalem and sought to defend it against reconquest. He was writing for people torn between powerless loathing and condemnation of the abusive power and authority of Rome, the horror of the world around them, and the lure of vindication and victory of the right way through human action and struggle. Sarah Bachelard, in an article on ABC Religion and Ethics on this passage, suggests we experience a similar dilemma in the face of our apocalyptic times. So what do we do? Despite the distress and anger at all that seems so wrong with our world, do we surrender to feelings of helplessness and just get on with life? Perhaps trying to shut our eyes and ears to what we feel we cannot change? Or do we become noisy activists, fighting and trying to make everything right through our own human efforts? Bachelard sees Mark's account of Jesus' teaching as very pertinent. It's worthwhile noting this starts with Jesus leaving the temple, the centre of earthly power and life and identity and belonging in his culture. Jesus is teaching how to travel the way amidst the violent cataclysms of history and the doom we bring on ourselves. And it's also worth noting yet again the narrative placement of this teaching in Mark, something he's so good at. Immediately prior to the account of Jesus' death and his rising again, that's where this apocalypse fits. As Bachelard observes, this new possibility for inhabiting life differently may be spoken in Mark's account before Jesus' death, but it is fully inaugurated and made available by his resurrection, not cancelling death, but showing life over which death has no more dominion. The nature of Jesus' resurrection is crucial to this way. He returns not vindicated in judgments, I was right, see, I'm on top of it all, not condemning, you lost, you're out, but restoring. In the light of the resurrection, we can better appreciate Jesus' teaching about living in troubled times. That what matters most is seeking and discerning the presence and pattern of God in the world as steadfast and merciful love. Don't focus on the drama, the fires and the fury, all the collapsing structures, and do not be alarmed. God has entered time and wills to liberate and heal. So look out for that reality and be ready to participate in it. And please note, this is not a version of the fundamentalist view that we need not worry about this world because it is passing away and our focus should be on the next. Nor is it a sort of defeatism, let go and let God. When Jesus exhorts his disciples and us in the face of apocalypse to keep awake, it requires discerning the way between evasion of the truth of how things really are and being overwhelmed by cynicism, rage, fear or despair. We can't do this alone, and we don't need to. The Reverend Mark Oakley, the Dean of St John's College at Cambridge in the UK, likened living as disciples of Christ amid the confusion of this world to walking along a beach with the ocean, the deep profundity of God's love and providence on the one side, and the hard, jumbled rocks of the reality of life and society on the other. We walk, all of us, between mystery and mayhem, and regularly pausing and turning to God for nurture and guidance is essential. Spiritual disciplines, prayer, purposeful reading scripture, contemplation, meditation, allow us to find strength and direction towards fruitful action. This is not easy. I wish I had a magic formula to share. But another theologian, Sarah Coakley, offers some guidance. It's not surprising, she argues, that conversation with God is hard. God is not just one item in the universe to be cajoled, stroked or manipulated in prayer. Feelings of inadequacy or incompetence in prayer are not necessarily negative signs, but they can act as a clearinghouse for the Spirit to operate. Paul makes this clear in Romans chapter 8, verse 26. The Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. Prayer as human achievement, my achievement, is impossible, but becomes possible and transformative when I realise and acknowledge that I don't come to prayer to remind God of what God might have forgotten or missed in the morning news. I don't come with a shopping list of good and virtuous issues for setting the world right. I come to prayer to prepare myself to receive what God is always already giving me, the gift of God's self. I do this by handing over my sense of incompetence to the Spirit who comes to my aid. And the Spirit breathes life into my most intimate desires, gently nudging me towards all that is good. As the character of C.S. Lewis says in the movie Shadowlands, I don't pray to change God, I pray to change me. And somewhere in these moments, perhaps I may discern glimmers of how I continue on the way. As I walk along this beach, journeying along the way between mayhem and mystery, I regard the jumbled rocks of life in God's beautiful and broken world. I acknowledge my own doubts and uncertainties and shortcomings, the deep roots of my own longing for peace and security, the ignominious memories of past failures. And I relax into the tide muddle, pause and turn with all that baggage towards the mystery of God. Right action needs willingness to wait in unknowing until the next step along the way is clear. Coakley offers these final words of wisdom. To want to pray is to pray. It is humanly impossible precisely because it is done by God. I wish that I had been able to dissect and analyse the apocalyptic mayhem that surrounds us and direct us all how to make right decisions and take godly action as we fearlessly face the truth. Sorry. But now we all come to what poet Wendell Berry describes as our real work. It may be when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings.